we have a marvelous speaker today and a topic which kind of is close to my heart because I was a Corps of Engineer officer during my Army career. But anyway, just a couple admin items before we get going, as always. First of all, we need to thank the Broomfield government and county staff for their support for our museum. We couldn't exist without them. And again, so many other organizations which help provide support for us by various grants and other, just our general support. In fact, I ought to, David, how about come up and mention a few things? David's our coordination point with the city and county.
Thanks so much, Mike. I really appreciate everything that this museum does in the community. These programs and what Carol's about to do are just so amazing and incredible for our community here in Broomfield. I do work for the city and county of Broomfield, and I wanted to share something actually representing the, there's a group in town that this museum is part of and has sponsored a couple of events. It's called Broomfield 2026. You may be aware that it's the 250th anniversary of the United States, and also the 150th of Colorado, also the 65th of the city of Broomfield, and the 25th of the city and county of Broomfield. So 25 years ago, the city of Broomfield became the city and county, the most recent county in our country. So, and as a part of that those kind of anniversaries, this group called Broomfield 2026 has been hosting a number of events. I just wanted to make you aware of one that's coming up this Thursday, which is July the 30th at 6:30. It's over at the Crescent Grange. Is everybody familiar with where that is? It's a beautiful historic building off of 120th here in Broomfield. So if you're interested in attending that, it's a mayor's panel. So kind of in the vein of like the last 25 years, all of the living mayors, former mayors of Broomfield will be there at the panel, including our current mayor. And so that'll be, 4 different mayors of Broomfield will be sharing in a panel about their experience as mayor, some of the challenges they faced, how Broomfield has grown and changed over the last 25 years. So it should be a really interesting event. At these events, sponsored by Broomfield 2026, they're at 6:30. They always have beverages, alcoholic and non-alcoholic beverages that you can have, and they have some snacks and that sort of thing. So it's kind of a fun event if you want to come out for that one. You can also check out all of their events on their calendar page, which is at the Broomfield Historical Society. It's the Broomfield 2026 calendar, so you can see all of those things. But I wanted to mention that one coming up on Thursday. Yeah, Roger. We've got Karen Stewart, Pat Quinn, who had 2 non-consecutive terms, and then Randy Ahrens and Guyleen Castriata, who's our current mayor. And the panel will be moderated by Sam Taylor, who is a former council member for the city and county. So yeah, that's our upcoming event, and thank you for the time to share about that.
Thank you, David. And David's just been a marvelous support for us at the museum. Anytime we've needed any sort of help, we go to David, and he just helps arrange it. What I'd like to do is just highlight a couple things we have. Many of you, you'll see you have copies of Veterans Life magazine on many of the chairs. We also have quite a stack here. This is a marvelous magazine which the articles are written by veterans and highlights the contributions our veterans have made to our country over the years, and particularly strictly in the Colorado Front Range as the focus. So if you've not seen this magazine before, take a copy. I'd strongly encourage you to, become a member or subscribe to the museum, to that magazine, because that's the only way it's going to survive. But it's been superb. The other item I'd like to highlight, and we certainly recognize this, Lamar's Donuts and Coffee has just been a great supporter of our museum since the beginning of the year, and is providing 2 boxes of donuts to each of our coffee and conversations. And so just the other day, Mike Kozar and I went over to give the manager, Mr. Doviarty, kind of a framed thank you presentation from us. And again, he was very supportive. So please enjoy the donuts. You can even take a few home after this because they don't get better with age. Not like us. Yeah, not like us. A few new things. If you missed out on the marvelous exhibit we had upstairs commemorating the 250th anniversary of this, founding of our nation, and the 150th anniversary of the founding, organization of Colorado, too bad. It's gone. And if you'll probably notice in the same place, it looks like a disaster, and it is. But we're in the process of coming up with a whole new exhibit area for that. However, off to the side, you'll see our honor board. This originally was strictly in terms of a large loose leaf binder, and if someone wanted to honor a veteran, their parents or whatever, we would work with them. They provide a nice photo of the veteran, and we work with them to provide a bio that will be into the booklet. And then we had a master listing, and you could just sort through it. Well, we've finally kind of moved on to the 21st century. And we have a marvelous kiosk here, which allows you to do a search of all the entries in it, by name, alphabetical, by period, and so on. And also makes it a lot easier for us to add stories and new names to it. So at all, if you have an interest, right next to it, we have kind of a sheet, which will give you information about how you can add to that yourself or, again, a parent, someone you might want to honor. But we hope to really fill this out now even more than we've had in the past. There's another big event going on up at the Rocky Mountain Airport, a car show and also, I think, an air show. So we don't want you to run off immediately after this, but at some point today, if you're looking for something to do, just shoot right up there. And we have a small little tent up there with museum information as well. Upcoming CNCs, just going into up through beginning of September. Zach Pondarov. Zach is a volunteer with us and had served in the Serbian army. So this is be interesting. We asked him, how about tell us what it was like for you in serving in the Serbian army, and what did you see the perception of what the heck's going on in Europe and everything else today. John Carter was the gentleman who had the marvelous display of small miniature toy soldiers, which were part of the exhibit we had just upstairs. So he's going to give us a talk about his collection and wargaming, which he certainly is very much involved. And then 12 September, Colleen Sawyer, marvelous person, has been a reenactor and has given several talks for us in the past related Eleanor Roosevelt, the letters between Ike and Mamie during World War II, and she's just marvelous. And she's going to give a talk about the latest work she's been working on. So that is an excellent presentation, and again, I can't speak more highly of Colleen, so I hope you'll join us certainly for that. We'll only have one CNC as of now in September because the 23rd, or roughly around then, is Broomfield Days, and that's always on a Saturday. So, but we'll have the museum open house, we'll have open displays, and of course the marvelous parade and all the other events that go on that Saturday. Yes, yep. And normally we're able to get kind of a checker extendable bus type vehicle, and then we'll have some of our older veterans ride in the parade and stuff. Okay, and just last, please make sure you've signed into the visitor's log. We have one out in the hallway and when you first came in. A good time to check your phone, make sure it's on silent. We hope that if you haven't become a museum member, you might consider, or more than consider, become a museum member. It really helps. And any donations and stuff help pay for. I used to be able to at least claim it paid for the donuts, but I can't anymore. But anyway, so without further ado, let me transition over to Carol. Come on up. Let me clean this. Well, let me just get around to get rid of this. Close that down. Let's get to the beginning. Okay. Now, is that on green?
Yes.
Okay, we're set to go.
And I
You have
need
the
to-
controller? Oh, I took it.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you. It's an honor to be here today. My name is Carol Kendal, and I've been a volunteer with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers for about 29 years now. And my background is as a geologist, and then I worked in the oil industry a little bit. And in science. And so what I want to do first is thank the Tri-Lakes project staff, our local, I'll tell you more about them in a minute, Corps of Engineers operations here in the metro area. And also, I thank Mike for all of his help as I got this all arranged. And then especially my family for their encouragement, technical support, and I need a lot of that. And help, my husband Paul, my son Mark, and our daughter Erin and her partner Joe. They've helped a lot. So, so first of all, my talk today will be about, has anybody been to Cherry Creek, Chatfield, or Bear Creek? Okay, those are all Corps of Engineers projects for flood control. And up here you'll see Cherry Creek was the first one, and then Chatfield and Bear Creek. The areas in blue, of course, are the reservoir, and then you know, Cherry Creek is, you know, on the Cherry Creek River Creek, and Chatfield right here on South Platte and Bear Creek. I'll explain more about all those later, but they all converge right here. The confluence is in Denver. And so the areas in green are owned by the government, and of course the land underneath the water is not owned by the government. This belongs to the water users. In the case of Chatfield, it's Denver, and Denver owns a lot of it, but there are about 11 other water users. And we will go next to, okay, next slide. Shows the reservoirs. This is Cherry Creek. And right here is the spillway for Kenwood Dam, and I'll tell you about that later. This, and the tower is way over here at this end. Chatfield, and the Platte River comes in here, Plum Creek over to the side. spillway, and everybody knows there's water here at the base, and there will be a test on this later. And then this is Bear Creek. You can see the main embankment. There's also a south embankment. I'll point it out in a different slide later. You can see Turkey Creek and Bear Creek coming together right here. And this highway is 287. And as these reservoirs were built, a lot of times roads had to be moved a little bit, or railroads in the case of Chatfield. Utilities, there's a lot of work involved. So, so this shows where we are, right there, and that's a little blow up of our area. So we are in the Omaha district. Actually, Denver is a relatively small field office, and you might wonder what, but does anybody have any idea why we're in the Omaha district?
Because of the Omaha Indians.
Well, no.
Okay.
The drainage.
I was wrong.
Yes, it is the drainage, because this map does not show the Platte River, the South Platte, then the North, and then this Platte empties right here. But all of the watershed of the Missouri River upstream of Omaha is in the Omaha district. And so if there's a flood one place, they're equipped to manage everything. And also they do the engineering for any of our embankments here if we need, or any big projects. The engineers there, the dam safety engineers and hydrologists and all are in Omaha. And what is done locally is operating and repairing and some engineering and monitoring instruments. Okay, so first of all, before we go on a little bit further, just a little bit about what is the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. Okay, the Corps of Engineers was, the first Army engineer was actually appointed by George Washington, so the Corps is as old as the Army, and 1775. And they were assigned to shoulder the burdens of war, the military engineering, and then also this insignia was adopted in 1840, and it's still around today, the medieval castle, white medieval castle on the red background, because it's a symbol of traditional military engineering. And so then the branches are the military, the regulatory. Okay, our regulatory office is here as well. And when anyone wants to, like, build a reservoir along one of the tributaries to the South Platte River, they have to go through the Corps of Engineers and present all kinds of environmental impact statements, be sure it won't impact the waters of the U.S. And the Civil Works, which is a lot of flood control. Also, today, what Civil Works is involved with is flood control, hydropower, recreation, regulatory, and building for the Army and Air Force, and then navigation. I think that's most of them. And also the Corps is, since 1941, the Corps has been in charge of Army construction, and a few notable examples are the Pentagon, the Lincoln Memorial, the Vehicle Assembly Building at Cape Canaveral, and facilities for the Manhattan Project.
Also the management of environmental cleanup for the Department of Defense facility.
Thank you. Okay, and so what we're going to do now is go back in time, because to set the stage, we really have to go back to the first recorded very bad flood I could get record of was 1844. And because of descriptions, it either equals or exceeds anything we've seen since. And there was a notable floods, and in 1859, a lot of people came to this area and settled along Cherry Creek because of, thank you. And of course, a lot of people built right next to the creek, even though they were told this isn't the best thing to do. And in 1864, there was a terrible flood, which sent huge waves of water and into Denver, did a whole lot of damage, and to everybody along the creek as well. This one is probably from, it might be from 1912, I'm not exactly sure. There are so many floods that have happened, it's just inundating. You know, there's like one or two almost every year. Some certainly more notable than others. And so here's one, you know, floods come and go. The Castlewood Dam, this is down near Franktown, kind of south or east of Castle Rock. I don't know if any of you have been there before. And this one was built in 1890. It was built on a bad foundation, pretty much, you know, like brick and mortar, and it didn't really ever pass inspections, but it did last for 43 years. It was built for irrigation, and the story is that in August of 1933, the man who tended the dam, you know, as a terrible storm was going on, and he thought, well, I'm going to go down in the embankment, because he had to go down to turn a crank so that he could open the gates more to let off the pressure. And as he walked out on the dam, it started shaking. So he ran off and called up the operator in Parker, and she called up the Denver police. And because of all this advance warning, there were no fatalities in this, but the farmers lost a lot in this. And also Denver had a lot of mud and, you know, suffered a lot of damage. So the solution to this was the Kenwood Dam. And a lot of these are really old pictures, like from right after World War II. And so the quality isn't the best. But this white across here was the old Kenwood Dam. It was approximately 50 feet high. And what's going on right here is the building of the Cherry Creek Dam that we have today. This would be the stilling basin of it right about in there. But this dam was built in 1935, and almost as soon as it was built, it was challenged by the storm in May of 1935. This was a very bad storm, which tested, you know, pretty much went over the top a little bit, but they, you know, thought, oh, this really isn't going to work. And also the big problem is that the intense storm cells were to the east. And in Kiowa, you know, so, you know, you're just getting into a little bit of a different drainage. That area and areas further east received 24 inches of rain, not snow, rain, within 6 hours. Yeah. And so the thinking became, what if this had happened over Cherry Creek? You know, it would have wiped everything out. So at this point, the Cherry Creek Flood Control Association enlisted the help of Congressman Lawrence Lewis, and so in 1937, Congress approved for investigations to begin, but they were told that you can't start building it yet because money will not be available until after the war. And
That was 1937,
yeah.
after the war.
Well, because the thing is, and thank you, because things take a while to develop because they did a lot of investigations, and so they said, okay, we're going to have the money, and by the time they were ready to start building, it was like 1941, and we have money, but you can't have it yet. So this picture was taken in '48. And here you see the Kenwood Dam I just pointed out, and the spillway still exists today. And then that's all that's left of it. And this is the current Cherry Creek Dam, the spillway right here. And this location was chosen because there is a small ridge between the Cherry Creek drainage and the tollgate drainage. Yes?
Can you define spillway, please?
Yes, thank you. The spillway is every reservoir is designed such that if the water builds up, the flood pool builds up to a certain level, that the water will go over, and the spillway is never as high as the top of the dam. And so that water will exit there, because if you go over the top of the dam, most likely the dam is going to go. And so the spillway here is designed so it empties into the tollgate drainage. And as you all can imagine, things have built up a lot since then. Interstate 225 runs right between these two here. And the spillway has never been used, even though floodwaters have entered. It takes a tremendous amount of water to get to the spillways. Okay.
This was a successful dam for almost 100 years now. Well, I don't know, 80 years. So who designed it?
Okay, and the Omaha engineers, and so as we and so the engineering for the embankments is done in Omaha, and operations are done here. In this diagram, this is just a typical embankment. This isn't one of ours, but it's typical. And ours are pretty much like this. And the bedrock, they just have it going to there. I'd have it going up to here, but whatever, to right here. Again, this is not one of ours, but the core is clay, which is basically impermeable. And then on the side in the yellow are the drains, the chimney drain, the blanket drain, the toe drains, because some water will leak through, and you want to get that water out of the embankment because that's needed so that you have a strong, stable embankment, and lower the pore pressure in there so that nothing builds up and challenges the structure. Then the light yellow here is random material, which can be everything from silt to very fine gravel. On the upstream slope is riprap, and then on the downstream slope is grass. And of course, we don't put riprap on both sides because rock is very expensive and it's hard to move. So, so this picture is taken from 1946, so right after the war they got started. And this is in the cutoff trench, which is that part that goes way down into the bedrock to anchor the dam. And they're backfilling it right here. Yes.
That would be clay?
That would be clay. You're correct. Thank you. And in this picture, you have to keep in mind that OSHA did not exist in '48. And, you've got to hand it to all of these people who, no hard hat. And of course, Mom and the kids are here on site. Yeah, I know. And here what they're doing is lowering the transition in what's one of the gate blockouts. And what it is the tower is over here and the conduits are out that way. And so this is going to be in that section. And then in this case, they're placing riprap. Some of the riprap came from the Kenwood Dam and the rest from a quarry in Golden. And in this photo, a man is preparing the downstream embankment. And again, you can tell that it was a long time ago with the...
In 1948 with horses.
Yeah, that's right. I guess this is where the term horsepower comes from. But, okay. And here we have the finished embankment. Well, I mean, it was finished in 1950. Does anybody know what these two right here are? Those two little bridges? Interstate? Yeah, that's the interstate. That's the beginning of 225. And I included this. Here's the dam road. And this road is actually owned by the federal government, but it is okay, I've hit something. Just a minute. Okay. There you go. Yeah. It's maintained by the city of Aurora, or the county, yeah. And this is the outlet works right here. And I'm pointing this out because this picture, obviously taken much later from up on the embankment, shows a lot of water coming out of one of these outlets. And so in the 80s, some low flow gates were put in. I'll talk. Okay, so they're the hydraulic gates, which are about 12 feet by 6 feet or something like that. But most of the time at Cherry Creek, we don't need a lot of water to let out a lot of water. And so there's low flow gates. And when those were put in, then they stopped raising the large gates so much. And it was found that, okay, we can't get the emergency gate in all the way in because too much sediment had built up. So once a year is what's called the Cherry Creek flush, okay? And downstream is notified about all of this. And so for an hour or so, they start letting out water and they run all of these until all of the sediment, to just flush out all that sediment, and then the gates operate just great. Okay, and even after 1950, when Cherry Creek was completed, the Army engineers knew that a large part of Denver would be unprotected, but and the money was actually appropriated in 1950, but the local people opposed. Oh, the Platte's never going to flood, and things like that. And so time went on, and floods came and went, but then a really bad one came, which I'm going to talk about in a minute, and some of you may remember. But first of all, we're going to talk about what the catastrophic weather ingredients are that have created these very bad floods. Every 20 or 30 years, they're a really bad one, and in this area. And so you need several factors. One is a strong, steady influence of low-level moisture, and typically that's coming from the Gulf, some from the Pacific, and depending on, but then a lot of unstable atmospheric conditions, particularly at the upper levels, and strong convection currents, clashes of the cold and warm air just sending everything aloft, and orographic. Okay, so the Gulf is we know what elevation that is, and we know what elevation we are, so you're coming up over the plains, and then it hits the Front Range, and this air is being pushed up, and then the air can't hold the moisture anymore because it's gotten up to the condensation level, and it starts raining. It can't get over the mountains because it rains before it can get over the mountains, and then more moisture keeps coming in, and it just builds and builds and builds and builds. And so we are going to now go to the flood. We're going to talk about the flood of 1965. Does anybody remember that one? Okay, would anyone like to share what they remember?
I was a little kid, and my mom was on the library board in Jefferson County. And the Golden Library was right by Clear Creek. And we went there in the middle of the rainstorm and saved library books.
Oh, wow. Very good. Thank you. And this one, okay, on this map, I'm showing you this because to point out some creeks here. And Cherry Creek was in existence at this time, but Chatfield was not, neither was Bear Creek. And so Wednesday started out as a nice day, but by noon there were tornadoes. There was a tornado unroofing houses over Palmer Lake. And by 2 p.m., the sky was as dark as night. The temperature dropped. Raspberry Mountain and Dawson Butte were just completely engulfed. And then it started raining. And it rained like no one had ever seen before. Boulders were rolling down the mountain, the buttes, just like, they were little pebbles or something. And the streams became rivers and raging water. Trees were uprooted, and all kinds of devastation. And so then it went down to, this is a picture of Castle Rock. And you can see that there's a big meander in the interstate and all this mud right here. And there's actually one story that I read about, and our first operations manager collected every newspaper article. And I've been through all these papers, and it's not like I'm looking digitized copies. These are the original things, and they're in great condition. But anyway, there was a couple that was in a car, and they were literally almost up to their neck in silt. And they were rescued and treated for hypothermia.
Did the flood create the curve that we experience at Castle Rock today? Or no?
No, but it just chewed right into the interstate here, and took out part of the other highways as well.
Okay, thank you.
And then this is Plum Creek, and you can see the raging water here. Usually Plum Creek is 150 cubic feet per second, and during the flood it was 154,000. And it just tore into everything. And this is like having so if you can think of standing and seeing a cube that's 53 feet in all directions, that's like a 4-story building going past you every second. And so that's how much water there was. And then this is Hampton Bridge. And the problem is it's not that there was anything wrong with the engineering of these bridges. It was that they were getting rammed with lumber, trees, mobile homes, heavy equipment, anything, butane tanks, anything you can think of. And indeed, this bridge down here came from upstream and probably helped in the tearing up of that one. And so the only saving grace for preventing more damage was Cherry Creek. Okay, okay, so we're good? All right, yes.
That water, sort of the flood water is mostly Plum Creek.
Yes, and thank you, because the Plum Creek, and so that's what I've talked about so far is just Plum Creek, but Plum Creek, of course, empties into the South Platte River, and then that carried it on down to Denver, and the flood surge was absorbed a lot by the floodplains, but Denver still received 40,300 cubic feet per second of water. So, so that created a lot of damage. Yes.
South Platte really didn't contribute much to the.
No. In this flood, no. There are cases where, which I'll talk about one other one later, but in this case, no, there was very little extra from the South Platte. It was Plum Creek. And there was some that fell over the Cherry Creek Basin, obviously is reflected here. And so you can see that, and of course, Cherry Creek held all of the water that it received, and so you can see the pool level going way up here, and indeed, it ended up about right there. It doesn't show quite all of it on there, because the level rose 16 feet overnight, and that added almost 14,000 acre feet of water. And if you go to Cherry Creek today, the typical pool level is 12,800 acre feet. So this more than doubled the volume, but of course not the, Cherry Creek is about 40 feet deep or a little bit more than that.
So we collected a lot of water that didn't get.
Sent down.
Yeah.
Right, and so it was a real help. And so the day after the flood, Governor Love requested and immediately received assistance from President Lyndon Johnson. And so in 1966, the Omaha engineer, here's the Omaha engineer on site, and of course, they were very measured in their comments because, you know, this dam should have been built earlier, and it was because there was local opposition. And so, so the colonel said that the highest peak of interest in any future flood control project is achieved the day after the area that it will have protected has been inundated, and the greatest apathy is recorded the day before. And so, he's right. And so here is Colonel St. Clair talking with Jack Unit, who is our first operations manager, about the plans for the embankment. And I found this in one of the design memorandums that are put out, you know, regarding the design of all the dams, and I just thought it was really, you know, the way that if everything was done this way, it would help a lot. But the magnitude of the flood hazard is more apparent in terms of regional characteristics and the basin runoff potential inherent in such storm histories than in terms of historic accounts which neither reflect current economic conditions nor represent the hazards of larger flood potentials. As we all know, you know, there's always development going on, and a lot of times it's encroaching on the floodplains. But the big thing to notice here is that the maximum flood that was determined previously for Plum Creek was 3,800 cubic feet per second, and what we got was 154,000. So that's 40.5 times as much. So, so this is a photo of Chatfield. Plum Creek comes right in on this side, and the Platte River right here. There's the intake structure, the outlet works right there, the spillway. Okay, and the spillway, yeah, I'll have a question about that one in a minute. Okay,
Can you tell us why the 40 times under or water, why is that the case? Things just occur that they don't account for, or what happened?
well, sometimes it's the magnitude of it because of okay, so what happened in the flood of 65 is that the system got stalled, and so it was held in place for a particular long period of time, such that it just continually rained over the same spot. It didn't move on like a lot of our storms do, some of our rainstorms we see, then it goes over northeastern Colorado. That didn't happen till a few days later, then they got it.
You said 24 inches in 6 hours.
That was the flood of 1935, and thank you, because I forgot to mention, this one was 14 inches in 4 hours. That's still a lot of water. And
That's something you don't, maybe a 1,000-year flood or something like that they talk about?
something like that, that's right. And this shows the embankment, and again, it curves here to catch Plum Creek. And you have to keep the river flowing, so the South Platte River is here, the outlet works are being built off the page here, and later on, this area will be closed. So, so in this photo, you see the intake, the conduits, which are now being buried, and the outlet works, the stilling basin, which I'll talk more about in a minute, right there. There's the South Platte River, okay?
And that up at the top, is that the Plum Creek one? At the top, is that Plum Creek?
No, that isn't.
Way up at the very top.
Okay, let me see.
See the top, is that Plum Creek?
Well, really, that's still the South Platte. Plum Creek is way over to
Okay,
this
I'm sorry.
to the side. That's fine. And Deer Creek does come in here, but it's kind of a minor contributor. Okay, these are the conduits being constructed. This is looking downstream. This is what we call the wet tunnel, the flood control tunnel. All the water goes through here, becomes the South Platte. The penstock here is for irrigation, because irrigation water rights go through here. And just for scale, this is 6 feet in diameter, and you can see some men back here working.
And what's the diameter of that whole, the first?
Well, it's an oblong. It's about 16 feet by 12, I think. I'd have to look that up. And here's a spillway. So I showed you the picture. There's always water at the bottom of the spillway. And of course, this is right after it's being constructed, okay. But okay, and the spillway is, and the top of this one is what's called a weir, but if the spillway is about 30 feet below the top of the embankment, of the dam crest. And you want that in case the water ever gets that high and this would put out a tremendous amount of water. There would be flooding downstream. But with this one, there's also a weir here too, which is like a 20-foot bump, and it allows the water to flow, in a laminar controlled flow, and then it comes down to the sill. It has baffles down here which help prevent erosion. But why is there water in the base of the spillway? Water never goes over it. So why is it there? Does anybody have any thoughts?
You're probably coming from the seepage through the embankment.
Well, that's an idea that, because the water table is going to be high here. Actually, there is a spring right here in all these trees.
Oh,
And
boy.
so that's what has supplied it. It's about 20 feet deep. Every year, Littleton Fire and Rescue does underwater rescues. in this area because the government allows them to. And there's an old car underneath the water with all the engine and everything out, but just so that they can practice underwater rescues. And this is the completed tower, intake tower. It does go down further. You just can't see it because of the hill there. These are the trash racks, and they're designed to keep out trees. Basically nothing else, just trees. And so I'll very quickly tell you the scuba diver story. This is true. In 1987, 2 men were fishing, and they were too close to the tower and not reading signs, but that say stay away. And one of the gates was open. So of course so one of them put on his scuba gear because one dropped his fishing pole, and he went through the trash rack, and he went through the open gate. It wasn't open too far, so that stripped off all of his scuba gear and pretty much everything. And he popped out after a 1/4 mile trip through this at the other end, and you know, it was wonderful because somebody happened to be staying late for work that day, noticed, called life flight helicopter, so they had to pump all the nitrogen out of his blood, you know, I mean, and put him in intensive care, but he survived. Okay, this was a teaching point on any tours that I did. Yeah.
You tested them.
Okay, and this is the manifold where that penstock comes out and all the irrigation pipe, and so one thing is the Chatfield is named after Edward Chatfield. He was a veteran. He fought in the Civil War, Union soldier, and he came to this area and developed the Last Chance Ditch, which is still in operation today, and it's now routed through here along with Nevada Ditch and City Ditch to supply water users. Okay, immediately after Chatfield, Bear Creek was developed. This is Mount Carbon and Turkey Creek and Bear Creek, and the embankment is built just downstream of the confluence. Here is a more recent picture. This is Highway 285, otherwise known as Hamden, and I think it had to be moved a little bit for this. And then also Colorado Highway 8 also had to be moved, you know, just to go around because they can't build too much of this on the government property, even though Interstate 225 is.
Are those highways a federal or state highways?
These are both state. Yeah, these are both state, I think. I don't think that's yeah, okay. Here's the main embankment, and then the south embankment to keep water, if it ever got high enough, from going over the highway and impacting the neighborhood. And this shows the closure of Bear Creek. So I mentioned that water was going through here while they were building the embankment. But at this point, the intake tower is built, which is pretty small for this one, and there's reasons, but I won't go into that. And so now the water is either held in a cofferdam or it goes around here and it can flow, and the outlet is right here. And so there you can see the core and the various colors are because this is a zoned earth fill embankment.
Can you explain the intake tower? The water's being
yeah.
seared there or what?
Yeah, I'll show you more pictures in a minute. Okay, so this is the intake, and these are the trash racks, and this one is a drop inlet. The water just drops and falls into this wet well. Now there is a dry well here, and there's some controls for some of the low-level conduits. And this one, does anybody remember, I'm sure I'm going to get a yes on this one, the flood of 2013? Yes. Okay. Would you like to share what? you remember about that one of you?
I live in Boulder, and we had 18 inches of water in our crawl space. It came up from the ground. We had an irrigation ditch behind our house, but it didn't overflow. The water came up from the ground.
Right, because there was just so much of it. Were you, or do you live kind of in southern Boulder, or?
Yes.
Okay, because yes, that's where it seemed like I heard a lot of people had trouble there. And this picture, this is the maximum right here. At Bear Creek Reservoir, the water rose 50 feet in a matter of a day or two. This is kind of more of our yo-yo reservoir because it's smaller capacity, and so there was a lot of water coming into it and it just rose. But it's designed for this. And so is the intake tower, because you notice you can't see the trash racks in this photo. And then here's the top of it, there's the top of it there. And then it doesn't show in this picture, partly because of the hill, but also the top of it was 32 feet underwater at that point. And so, as you can imagine, dewatering this after the event and after all the water's gone is very unpleasant. You know, it's cold, it's dirty, it's all kinds of other things. And then they've got to clean off all the equipment. But it's designed for this. And let's see. Sorry, not keeping up. Okay. And then also another thing is of course we're, you know, all of northern, where we are, is downstream from all of this. So there's really no way that you know, we can keep flooding from happening here. But the fact is water was held in Bear Creek longer than it would usually be held until the channels further north could accept more water. So that's the way that some help was made. Okay, and in this picture we're going to talk about just the ongoing maintenance of all these. And so, yeah, the woolly mammoth. This was found during the excavation of the spillway at Chatfield, so this stopped the work for 3 weeks. And while they took care of getting this out and preserving it and sending it to the Smithsonian and all that. And right here is the calibration of low flow gates at Cherry Creek. So there's always something going on, and the operations contracts with, you know, local businesses for some of this work. The hydraulic steel requires everything requires inspection, and then anything that's considered fracture critical requires more frequent inspection. But here they're hauling out a trash rack and examining all the, you know, corrosion. And in this photo, the man is inspecting a bulkhead. This is at Chatfield. And then this one, you know, even though it's got some concerns here, it was still, you know, they said, okay, we're going to look into getting a new one, but it's really fine for right now. Because this is down in the water all the time. That is not, it's dogged in place, and so really it hangs just above the water level, and then it can be lowered as needed. And so, so with the water at all these reservoirs, the water again does not belong to the U.S. government, it belongs to the water users. And usually the Colorado water engineer says, okay, I need so much water to deliver, you know, for water rights deliveries. And then the operations will adjust the gates so that they're delivered that amount of water because they know how long it takes to get there, et cetera. But, and so this is all done when it's at or below the normal pool level. But if the level rises to where it's in what's considered the flood zone, then Omaha controls the gates. Because, you know, they may have flooding somewhere else up here, and they've got to balance everything. And so they were out here for the flood of 2013, the dam safety engineer, and some of the others. And so the state park does not own any of the land, like Chatfield State Park, Cherry Creek and all that, and, or the city of Lakewood. They lease the land from the federal government, knowing that at some point they might get flooded like happened in that case, and they have to take care of it. But
Who takes care of the federal?
no, the state would take care of it. And this is our Tri-Lakes Project office, where we have the Tri-Lakes and regulatory, and you can see the Chatfield intake tower right back there. And let's see. And then another thing is that this office cannot protect from local flooding that might happen in Denver or somewhere else downstream, because there's so many more impermeable surfaces being built. And so the only thing that can be done is, if there's local flooding, try to hold the water in the reservoirs. But one thing to know is that the first thing is protecting the project comes first, because obviously if the project isn't protected, there's a problem. But other than that, it's working with the state and local governments as much as possible. This is Confluence Park in downtown Denver with South Platte, and this is where Cherry Creek empties into it. And so everything comes together here, and because of this, and that's the picture you saw was right there. And because of that, if there's flood storage at one pool, like when Bear Creek was really full, then we can do, and they needed to hold the water, we can let water out of these two reservoirs. So they're all kind of worked in concert with each other. And this shows a flood picture from the flood of 1983, I think, 2,000 cubic feet per second. This is Chatfield, the manifold which you saw, and the outlet, the flood control conduit right here. And when the water comes out, it first goes down a hydraulic jump, a steep slope, and this gets out the energy. Then it goes in the stilling basin, which is about 91 feet long, and that helps calm the water. And then with all the riprap here, you know, it gets it pretty calm once it's moving further downstream. And this is so when I look at all the intake towers, this one to me looks like a castle, so I like that one. But, you know, and this is the late 40s, early 50s vintage that the Corps of Engineers was building. And so Denver will be well protected, is well protected, and will continue to be for any floods that come, because of the work of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, who has done excellent work on this. They did what no one else could do before, and maintain it with integrity and little disruption to anybody. And so,
Maybe we can show the water, how the water goes. It comes in from what area?
okay, so here is the, and the thing is at first Cherry Creek did not have a reservoir in it until about 1958, when the governor said, we'd like to have recreation. And they said, okay, we can do this. And they have to do engineering studies to be sure, okay, if we have this kind of flood, that's what's going to happen. You know, we can take this much water. So, so here is Cherry Creek, but it goes in through here and then through the outlet works.
Where's the outlet work?
Well, on the other side, the conduits run underneath the embankment. And I can show you afterwards. And then, and so I will end with this emblem here. This is the 250th year emblem. And you notice the Army's, well, you all know it's a year older than the country. And I just, am thankful for this vital branch of the Army. Thank you very much. Are there,
Any other questions? Yes.
What's the design life expectancy in the dams, and how is the silting of the reservoirs?
Okay, that's a very good question. As far as some dams are aging in this country. The average age of dams is 60 years old right now. And this is well maintained, and they do inspections, special inspections every 5 years. And, if there gets to be a problem, they will call it out. But a lot of times just the maintenance, the ongoing repair keeps it working well. I mean, I'd trust my life to any of these three because I know how they're built. And then you had another part of the question.
The reservoir is silting up over the years.
Oh, okay. Okay, and so all of the, and you're right, they probably can go about 100 years because they are filling up, that's true. But, I just talked about Cherry Creek, and that's because it was right by the gate, but there's other filling in. But typically it's about 100 years. On these, Bear Creek may not be quite as much because it's a smaller reservoir. Any other questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Oh,
Was the level raised in at Chatfield to provide storage for more irrigation water?
well, that's a very good question. And, I'm glad you mentioned that because that's one small thing I forgot to mention is that water users wanted more water, and so after a 25-year study, again, it takes a lot of engineering studies on this. It was approved in 2012, and the flood control pool is now 12 feet higher than it used to be. So sometimes it is higher, but if the water isn't available, of course, it's not going to be there. But that's it.
After locally, Barker Reservoir, they're raising it now.
Yeah.
And that's more of a concrete design.
Gross
Growth. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And are we talking the color?
No, I'm talking about.
Okay.
It was like the Platte River after the 2013 flood, from the north, turn to Yosemite and then north, and that was high through June in releasing the water that was at least through June, releasing that flood water. The Platte was maybe 10 feet higher than normal.
And when was this now?
2013.
Oh, okay.
Well, the bigger challenge we have here, this is so much even for our cities, close enough, but they try to design ways to flush the water through.
Mhm.
But once they're next to no barrier, so much of the flooding, if you saw out east of Longmont and I-25, you can't prevent it because so much water is coming down. The stream beds aren't very deep.
No.
And at that point, it just spreads completely out. And we'll expect to see more of that in the future.
And go ahead.
I was just going to say the floodway continues further out you go, so it
Yes.
becomes less and less.
Yes. But you don't have the same barriers built up to prevent it.
And that's true. But I'll just mention this one other thing, and then if anybody else has any questions, I'll be glad to talk to you later. But the flood of 1965, there was so much water also east, because again, then they got the storm and it stayed over there for a number of days. And in the town of Wiggins, which is northeast Colorado, because of two rivers delivering water, at max they had 466,000 cubic feet per second. And just for reference, the Mississippi River emptying into the Gulf is 593,000 cubic feet per second. So, I mean, it was just a tremendous amount of water. And then, of course, all that water, and a lot of that ended up going to Nebraska and Kansas. But again, if anyone has any questions, please, I'll be up here at the front. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Oh,
I wanted to give you one of our challenge coins to thank
Oh,
you.
thank
That was
you.
a marvelous talk.
thank you very much.
So please come up and visit some more.
Are there any plans for more dams?
Not in this area.
Okay, and what about the, above Fort Collins is, what dam? Like Horseshoe Reservoir?
Yeah, now up there are some dams. Those are not